Hey guys, Mike here with EBR, and this is the Ride1Up Prodigy V2. Now, if you guys remember last time we had a commuter up here that looked similar to this, it had a pretty hefty price tag, and you guys were very vocal about what you thought of it down in the comments section. Now let's try that again with this one that shares a lot of the same features, but comes in at just a third of the price. So let's see how it really stacks up, and we'll deep dive into the Ride1Up Prodigy V2. All right guys, so the Ride1Up Prodigy V2 is a very sleek looking commuter bike. Now it comes in at $2,295, and that's in this configuration with a standard drivetrain, so a normal chain, rear derailleur, and trigger shifters up top. But should you want a more premium version for an additional $400, so right around $26, they have a belt drive version that also has an NVOLO internally geared hub, so you can have smooth shifting without the trigger shifters and rear derailleur. So a very nice setup for a small fee if you want to go punch it up just a little bit. Now this comes in two frame configurations. Here we have the high step, and there's also an ST or a step through version. And regardless of which one you choose, you can pick three colors. So this one here is the Onyx Black. They also have a faded bronze, which is kind of a flat dark earth brown. And then they also have what they call Sea Fog, which is more of a silverish gray, and all three finishes come in the same matte finish paint, which I think looks really good. I'm kind of a fan of matte black in general, so this is definitely the one I would be opting for. Now when it comes to sizing, this comes in a rider range of 5'5" up to 6'1", and if you go with the step through version, that one is going to be 5 foot flat up to 6 foot, so you have kind of a full 12 inches to work with there. Now some geometry numbers for this specific frame. The step up here, the high step or the standover height is going to be around 27 inches. The wheelbase is around 44.5 inches, and your reach up top is about 16.2 inches. And then you have about 8 inches of adjustability here in the seat post. So I'm 5'11", and I personally found, even though this is the taller of the frames, I found this to be a little bit small for me in frame sizes. It does ride fine, and it still fit me fine for riding. I just felt like it was a bit undersized in the frame area. However, it didn't detract from the ability to ride it or even being comfortable. Now, when it comes to weight, we weighed this one here, and this one weighed 59.5 pounds. We took out the battery, and it went down to about 53.5 pounds. So the battery itself is a 6-pound battery. Now, the payload capacity on this is 300 pounds. And when it comes to tires and wheels, they went with a black alloy 27.5-inch wheel, and they wrapped those in a Maxxis Recon Race 27.5 by 2.4-inch tire. And if you're not familiar with the Recon Race series, that is going to be Maxim's, I'd say it's kind of like an XC or a cross-country mountain bike tire. It's one that has raised studs for traction, but not so much that it's a full-on MTB tire, and it's not so smooth that it's a commuter tire. It's kind of an all-terrain, maybe an SUV style tread, something that can do a little bit of everything. It's got fast rolling resistance, and it's very capable both on and off-road. Now I've been running these at about 30 PSI, and that seems to be a good balance of traction and comfort. When it comes to protection for you while you're riding, you do have front and back fenders. Now these fenders are black alloy painted to match the bike. And then you have a rear rack, which is Ride1Up's Connect Plus rear rack that has integrated taillight into it. And you also have mounting points here and here on both tubes for water bottle cages. And you also have the ability to buy the Ride1Up Connect Plus front rack, which there's no mounting points as far as like traditional Bosses, but instead they sell one that connects to the fork itself. Now when it comes to lighting, you do have a headlight and a tail light, which I told you about here in the rear rack. Now the headlight up front is an LED at 80 lux, rated at 80 lux. As far as brightness goes, it's definitely bright enough for you to travel on your rides in the evening or early mornings, and it's not so bright that it's overbearing to oncomers. All right, so with all of the kind of overview out of the way, this is where this bike gets very interesting, especially for this $22.95 price tag. Now this has a mid-drive motor, and it's made by Brose, or Brose, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This is a brand that's very well known in the e-bike industry, including my own personal Specialized that I own has a Brose motor in it, and it's a very good feeling mid-drive. Now these are nominally rated at 250 watts. Now they don't give a peak wattage rating, but what they do say is it gives you up to 380% of your natural pedaling effort. And what that translates to is a very natural pedaling experience. And frankly, in my opinion, this ride's just as nice as my personal Specialized bike. Now you have 4 riding modes. You have Eco, Tour, Sport, and Boost. Obviously, as you go, Eco being the most mild and Boost being the most high-powered. This bike can get up to 28 miles an hour without any issues, and having a torque rating of 90 Newton meters makes this bike very capable, even on steep inclines. It just does really, really well. I can't really overstate that part. This is a really nice setup for the motor. Now, one cool feature about this motor that I don't think is talked about enough is the drivetrain has a shift sensor that communicates with the motor. And what that means is when I initiate a trigger shift up top, whether I'm upshifting, downshifting, it doesn't matter. It's going to take a little bit of the motor power off for a second, just so that shift can engage without making this bike constantly shift under load. Now with e-bikes, especially mid-drives, shifting under load is it's kind of a problem that will chew through cassettes, chains, and drivetrains in general. So by adding this shift sensor and allowing the motor to back off for a second, just to get that shift done, is going to add a lot of life to your drivetrain that would otherwise get chewed up fairly quickly. Now I will say when you make those shifts, you will notice you'll lose about a half mile an hour that's on flat ground. And I did notice when I did it on steeper hills, if I initiated a downshift on a steep hill, like halfway up it, then you lose quite a bit of momentum just because of gravity and the motor kicking back for a second. So I would say, and what I found that I started doing was every time I saw a good incline coming that I was going to need to downshift for, I would just do it right before I got to the hill. That way I wouldn't take away any of my natural, just forward moving momentum and allow myself to get the full power of the e-bike as I hit the hills. But all in all, it's a really nice system that's gonna not only feel really good when you're riding, reach 28 with a lot of confidence, but also it's just gonna last a little bit longer with your drivetrain because you're not constantly shifting under load. Now, when it comes to the battery on this bike, it is a 36-volt battery with 14 amp hours. And that gives us 504 watt hours of power. Now, it also comes with a set of keys so you can remove this battery, and let me show you how that's done because it's a little different. So you get a standard key like you normally would expect. This is the battery's fully sealed inside. This is just a cover. So you put the key in, and that's gonna release everything. But first, the cover will come out, and you can set that to the side. And then there's a metal tab you'll push down to drop the whole battery. The battery is 6 pounds. Has a 1-year warranty along with the rest of the bike. It also has the ability to charge off the bike, and you have this external battery level meter so you can see in your house or wherever you're charging without having to put it back on the bike just to see where the battery's at, which I always appreciate on these batteries. Now, this can be put back inside the bike. These are UL 2271 certified, by the way. So to put this back, you're just gonna reverse that process. The indicator on the bottom outside, put the bottom in first, snap in the top, and then do the same with the cover. Bottom in first, snap into top, and you're good to go. Now, when it comes to range, they say this bike can get between 30 and 50 miles. Now, when I heard that, I thought that was a pretty conservative range. We did a range test on this, or I did a range test on this, and in eco mode, I got 73 miles, which is far past what they said I would get. And then in boost mode, averaging over 20 miles an hour, or right at 20 miles an hour, I still got 32 miles. So it really exceeded their range expectations, but with full disclosure, I'm 180 pounds and that was on relatively flat ground for the entire ride. So if you have varying terrain or any kind of significant hills in your area, you might be closer to that 30 to 50 miles, but all in all, still very nice setup for the price of this bike. All right, guys, so up here in the saddle area, we have a Cell Royale Viento model of saddle. It's pretty comfortable. It's got kind of a firmness to it that some might find a little too firm, but all in all, it's still a comfortable saddle with some good ergonomics to it. Now down below, you've got an alloy seat post with quick release for adjustability. Now moving up front, we do have suspension on this bike. Now normally at this price range, we see a coil fork, so I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see an air fork here. This one has 100 millimeters of travel. On the top of the crown, on the right side, you've got a lockout feature that will lock the fork out if you don't want that compression when you're riding. And on the top left side, you've got an air valve to refill this for air based on your weight and kind of how you're riding the bike. Now, there's no rebound adjustment like you might see on a higher end air fork, but nonetheless, this is a nice step up from the more commonly seen coil forks that we see here. Now, up here in the cockpit, let's take a look at what we got going on. So starting off in the center, we have a Brose stem. It's an 80 millimeter stem. There's no adjustability to it. You have an alloy handlebar that's got a 25-degree sweep to the rear, and you have about 45 degrees of rise in this bar. On both ends, you have lock-on ergonomic rubber grips, as well as your Tektro Orion 4-piston caliper brake levers that also have reach adjustment, which is a really nice feature on this. And on this side, you have your microshift Advent trigger shifters, and over here, you have your Brose display. Now, in the middle, you've got your headlight, the 80 lux headlight, and then when it comes to wiring, in general terms, it's clean and it looks good routed into the frame. I will say though, there is one wire going from the headlight into the rest of the wire management or cable management. And it's just kind of a thin gauge wire with exposed, there's just no protection around it. If I owned this bike, I'd probably just go down to the hardware store and get some rubber heat shrink just to protect that a little bit more. I don't like seeing that exposed wire there. But all in all, nice clean setup in the display or in the cockpit area. But speaking of display, let's take a closer look at this Brose display. All right, so this is the Brose 1.5-inch all-around color display. Over here on the left, you have your battery bar meter, as well as a battery percentage up top, which you can toggle that on or off if you don't want the battery percentage. And headlight indicator because the headlight is on. And over here is your PAS level. It's currently on off, but as you flip the rocker switch down below the panel, you'll see it goes between Eco, Tour, Sport, and Boost being the highest. Here you have your speed in miles an hour, and then you have some data that goes along the bottom, which you can change by hitting the mode button right here. So here we have max cadence, power output, average power, max power, range, time, trip meter, trip time, average speed, max speed, and your cadence when you're pedaling, and your average cadence, which looks like we're back full circle there. Now, if you want to get into some settings, even though this display is super small, it still has plenty of things you can customize. You're going to hold the mode button right here. So I'll hold that down, and that takes us to our settings menus. So you can get all your trip information there, but let's go into more of the important settings. So we have language here. Obviously, you guys know what that'll do. Now, this feature, Bluetooth, will pair the bike to your phone. However, that is for models different than this one. So I went to download the app for this Brose motor and it says it's not available in America. So it's probably more of a European model setting for other bikes that use that service. So down here you have screens. You can switch between a sport or a basic screen, which just changes the layout. The display itself, you can do automatic brightness, or you can change the brightness manually from 10% all the way to 100%, or even go to a full black and white display. System here has your metrics, so like whether you want miles or kilometers, your time format, 12 or 24, your battery status indicator, that's where you can change between showing the battery bar or the percentage. Your clock, you can set your time. Shutdown timer is basically how long it takes the bike to turn off once you don't touch it anymore. So if you just park the bike and walk away, within 15 minutes, it will shut off on its own. This will take your bike back to default settings, and this will take you back. Here you can go into more information about regulatory information on the bike and the drive unit, as well as some software and firmware version information. Here you can get your service intervals. It says basically at 10,000 miles to get it serviced. You can go back here, and then that takes you back to the home screen. So small display, but it's got really good brightness. It's got everything you need, and should you need to tweak some advanced settings, you can still do that right here in the display. There's no app companion for this bike, so everything you need is right here in the display, and that is really it. All right, guys, we're out here on the Ride1Up Prodigy V2. And it looks like they got some sort of event going on here, so I'm going to turn around. The geometry on this is something I say often, but we do a lot of these style bikes, and it's kind of a hybrid, right? So I'm not fully upright on my sit bones, and I'm not fully leaning into the handlebars. It's a kind of a mix of both. A little bit of weight on my palms here in the grips, and a little bit of weight back on my saddle, and I have a good view kind of all around me right in front. The comfort on this bike is just what you'd expect. It's got a good geometry. It's got a nice Cell Royal saddle that's got some good, like, kind of a firm memory foam feel to it. And then you have that 100 millimeters of travel and the air fork up front, which I think feels really good. You know, when you ride a front fork like this, you may not think it's doing much, but if you were to set a GoPro down by the front fork, just on a road like this, you'll see it making little tiny movements all the time. And that's the kind of improved comfort that you don't necessarily quote unquote feel or see, but it's doing its job. And if it was to lock out, you would definitely feel a bumpier ride. The tires are the 27.5 by 2.4 inch wide Maxxis Recon Race. I think they have the cool gum wall sides to them. It's kind of a look right now that I'm into. They make a tiny bit of road noise, but when you have those knobbies and traction, that more aggressive tread pattern, you get the advantages of being able to go off-road and have traction, but you also get a little bit more road noise. The star of this bike is the Brose mid-drive motor. So it's the TF Sprinter edition that's got 250 nominal watts and peaks at up to 380% of your effort. So almost 4 times your effort is put into the motor's output. I can't really overstate how well it feels. If you've ridden a nice mid-drive, then you know. If you haven't and you've only ridden a rear hub motor and you think, you know, how much different could it be? I would say just go down to a bike shop near you or try one of your buddies with a mid-drive and just see that difference, because there's definitely a difference there. And it feels really refined. It just feels like a more premium ride. There's a reason why they come with a premium price, and that's largely because of the performance and the feel. They just feel really good, and you would think 250 nominal watts would be nothing, but the way its efficiency and its power delivery is just so smooth and natural and capable. Like I said, if you haven't done it before, just go give one a try. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now the drivetrain, the Microshift Advent, it's a good enough range and gears for almost any kind of riding you're doing. What I love most about it is the shift sensor. So drivetrains get a lot of stress from e-bikes, specifically mid-drives, and chains and rear cassettes just take a lot of beating. They take a lot of damage, and they wear the pulleys out on the chain faster. They wear the teeth off the rear cassettes faster. And having a shift sensor, every time I shift, it sends a little signal to kill the motor for just a split second to let the power delivery come down, make the shift happen while it's not under load. The motor kicks right back on, and you're on your way without damaging your drivetrain. And now there's no way for you guys to see that or feel it, but if you look at my speedometer here, it says I'm going about 15.3, 15.5. I'm not on much of an incline, but let's try to get the speed consistent here, about 15.5. I'm gonna shift down and you'll see a drop in my speed. Well, if I don't do it first. So 15.5, let's just shift down. And you see how that instantly went down to 13.7, 13.6, and then we're going back up again. So on face value, it's not really a big deal, and you wouldn't really notice it. But on a hill, if you're on a steep hill and you're doing a climb, you might be cruising with your e-bike, but then if you decide, oh, this is getting kind of hard, I need a downshift, you're gonna lose a lot of your forward momentum and your climbing momentum and your speed and kind of have to rework to get that back. Now, it's not really a bad thing. It's just kind of a fact of having a shift sensor, and that's just kind of the offset of having the perk of being able to save your drivetrain, is that you'll have to start focusing on your shifting points more, basically shifting before you get to the hill and after you're on the hill versus during the hill. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, between the shift sensor, the mid-drive, the overall comfort, the air fork, and generally just the good looks. I really like the matte black paint job on it. I think it's just a solid bike that's gonna be a good all-around bike for most folks. Whether you're commuting, whether you're just riding it on the weekend for fun, getting to school, it's not really gonna matter. This is a bit of one of those SUV style bikes. It's got the ability to kind of do a little bit of anything you want without being fully dedicated to one area. And I think it really shines in that, just excels at that. So let's go back and talk to Ben and get some mechanics thoughts, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, guys, this is that time where we sit down with Ben, and he's our in-house mechanic who goes over his thoughts on the bike. And I'm gonna let him do his thing, but I just wanna say thank you to a sponsor, Feedback Sports, for providing us with their Pro HD aluminum rack and some of their tools. If you guys like to tinker on your bikes and you need a durable, good bike stand that's also lightweight and packs up small, definitely give that a check. I'll put a link down in the description. Ben, just kick it off with what you like about the Prodigy.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. I really like this bike. I've ridden one of the other Prodigies that's got a belt drive, and this is basically the same thing, just in the chain drive version, so I'm really familiar with it. To start it off, I really like that it's an air-charged fork. Okay, what does that mean? That means you can take this cap off and pump more or decrease the air pressure in it, so you can have air pressure and a suspension fork that will work for pretty much every body weight or riding style. I love that. Some of the other bikes will come with a mechanical spring that only has a very small range of adjustment, which doesn't work for every body weight and doesn't work for every body style. So, man, I love the air fork. It does come with a lockout as well. Those are a couple of things I really dig about this bike. The brakes, they're using Tektro 4-piston brakes. These bikes like to go fast, and I like to go fast on them. So when you put a 4-piston brake on these bikes, stopping is super easy to control, a lot of power, good progressive feel. I absolutely love anything Tektro or TRP, so that hits a home run for me. The Brose motor on this, which I'm using again on that belt drive, very natural. It feels awesome. Acceleration is smooth, very easy to predict, and it's just got a lot of power, even when you're getting up to 25 or 30 miles per hour. Big home run for me. With this motor, it does come with an oversized bottom bracket spindle. I always love that. It just feels better. To me, I can feel it when I get on the bike or I stand up out of an intersection or just railing in through a turn or a corner. I can feel a difference, and I think that there's not that much more involved with putting these bigger spindles on e-bikes, so hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. One thing that you don't see a lot on bikes like this, or e-bikes, is on the rim. If you'll note, there are stainless steel eyelets around the spokes as they enter the rim. Why is that good? Okay, so on a bike like this with this much power, the spokes are going to go through a lot of stress. So these eyelets mean you can tension the spokes higher, ultimately means a stronger wheel that's going to handle the stresses of acceleration, braking, and just general riding better than a rim without those reinforced eyelets. I think another thing to point out on this one is the shift sensor. So on a mid-drive bike, there can be up to 3 or 4 times the amount of torque on your chain and cassette. So why does that matter? When you're shifting and the motor's going, you can eat these chains up. I've seen people break chains. I've seen bent cogs on the rear when you're shifting and the motor is going. So this just means when you shift, the motor says, oh, I'm going to take off for just a second, allow that shift to happen, and then boom, the power goes right back on. I love that part about this bike. I think it's great. I also do like that this is a 27.5 wheel diameter. Some bikes only have a 26. Some bikes are really big with a 29. I'm 5'9". This 27.5 feels great to me. I love the size, the rollover, just in general. The bike with that wheel size, it performs great.
Nice, man. And what kind of things would you improve on this bike?
Great question. So only a couple things. Again, I really like this bike and the Prodigy line in general. The one thing that I wish they would get away from is a proprietary headlight stem mount. And the only reason is because if that does bend or tends to break somehow, it might be kind of hard to find a replacement part just to get your headlight fastened back on. Maybe they can find one that fastens to the fork or perhaps right around the handlebar clamp. It would just make it a little bit better if in case that ever breaks or bends. The fenders they chose on this are aluminum. I traditionally don't like metal fenders, whether steel or alloy. I prefer plastic, but the way that they've attached it to the rack, the frame, and the fork, it's really tough. So it's going to be able to take some impacts, not bend or anything, or stay in place. So I think that those are, they're nice for what they are, but I still would always prefer plastic. Well, there's 3 last points that I'll make, and it really comes down to the size of the bike. As great as these bikes are, as good as they fit, at 5'9", I wish that there would be a wider handlebar, for one, because it just seems like you can control the bike better with more width there. Secondly, the seat post is what's called a straight seat post. It's very nice on a bike like this if it's got a setback, meaning the clamp is about 1 inch behind the center of the seat post. That would make it a little easier for guys my side to jump on and ride it. And then the last thing is these bikes are offered in one size. Well, one size doesn't necessarily fit all, and in a case like this, even for me at 5'9", I wish it would be a size large frame, or perhaps if Ride1Up could make just 2 frame sizes. This one, for folks that are, say, 5'6" or below, or one for guys like me that are 5'9" or maybe even up to 6'4". It would just be a better feeling bike if it was a little bit bigger. That's all I've got to say. I really like this bike.
Nice, Ben. Once again, man, thank you for your time and thoughts on this bike.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, guys, so that wraps things up on the Ride1Up Prodigy V2. Remember, this is the standard drivetrain version, but they do have the belt drive version with the Involio CVT internally geared hub transmission. So several options on this bike. I think it's a great looking bike, and I think with all the features, when you compare it to some other bikes out there at much higher price points, I think this thing really does punch above its weight class. But let me know what you guys think down below. If you guys haven't done so already, consider subscribing and liking this video. And until the next review, I'll see you guys out on the trail.